I was folding laundry in the living room. The evening settled quietly, a calm that often carries a deeper silence within it. The television hummed softly, trying to fill the empty spaces. My husband was away, his absence now routine. I thought how strange it is that humans adapt even to loneliness until it becomes familiar enough to stop questioning. This room once felt full of movement when Daniel was younger, running in, talking endlessly about discoveries. Now at 17, he moved like a shadow of independence, present but reserved, growing into himself. As I placed the last shirt, I heard slow, uncertain footsteps approaching from the hallway. Daniel stood in the doorway, hesitating, hands in his hoodie pocket, posture tense. I sensed something heavier. I set the laundry aside and patted the space beside me, inviting him without pressure. He walked over and sat down, keeping a small distance. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Then he exhaled and said in a low voice that he wanted to talk. I nodded, placing my hand on his knee. He explained hesitantly that he felt confused about himself, disconnected from certainty. He worried something inside him was missing or incomplete, comparing himself to others. When he said he felt different, my heart ached, not for what he said, but how alone he must have felt. I told him nothing about him was wrong. Being different is part of being human. 17 is an age of pressure to define oneself. Identity is a process, not a test. He asked quietly, what if I never feel the way others feel? What if I never figure it out? I told him not having answers now doesn't mean he never will. Some take longer to understand. People change as they grow. All of that is completely normal. The idea of broken is unfair comparison. Something in him softened, eased like a heavy object being lowered. He leaned closer. We sat in silence, not uncomfortable, but one that felt like understanding forming slowly without words. Later that night, I couldn't sleep replaying his words. Young people carry invisible pressure. Parenting at this stage is less about answers, more about removing fear from uncertainty. The next morning, I woke with quiet determination to shift the atmosphere, starting with myself. I wanted Daniel to see confidence and self-respect lived daily, not reserved for a certain age. I chose a deep blue dress I hadn't worn in years to remind myself I still existed beyond routine. Brushing my hair, adding simple makeup, I reconnected with a version of myself I had set aside. Entering the kitchen, the smell of breakfast filled the air. I prepared a more thoughtful meal. I heard Daniel coming down the stairs, his footsteps slower. He paused, noticing the change in me. He commented that I looked nice, almost shyly. I smiled, thanking him. I told him I decided to start the day differently, to feel more present in myself. He kept glancing at me, not in judgment, but observation, trying to understand what had changed. I shared that confidence is about carrying your sense of self internally, existing without constant comparison. He asked if people ever feel fully sure of themselves. I told him most don't, even adults. Uncertainty is not failure, but part of growth. Over days, I noticed subtle, meaningful changes in him. He began speaking more openly about school, asking questions without retreating into silence. One afternoon, he surprised me by walking over and hugging me with genuine need for comfort. I held him back without hesitation. Reassurance doesn't need explanation, it just needs presence. I told him he could always come to me like that. He nodded quietly, storing that permission. Our conversations shifted from avoidance to openness, not forced but natural. He began expressing thoughts about his future, sometimes uncertain, sometimes curious, sometimes anxious. I reminded him he didn't need to rush. Life unfolds gradually, people grow into understanding themselves. One evening, he came home with a small bouquet of wildflowers, picked himself, full of effort. He handed them to me, saying he just wanted to show appreciation. I accepted them warmly. We sat talking about everyday things, worries that felt lighter when shared. I realized we were building a stronger emotional connection rooted in honesty. In helping him, I rediscovered parts of my own identity that had been quiet for years. Growth is not limited to children, it continues for parents too. Watching him settle into a calmer sense of self, I understood my role was not to define his path, but to walk beside him until he felt ready to walk it on his own. That brought a quiet peace. A quiet sense of peace that stayed with me long after the house grew still again.